Hey guys, it's Kevin in my review for Luca. And what Luca is essentially about is basically it takes place within the 1950s and 1960s, and basically we center on this character, Luca Paguro. He is this sea monster who lives underneath the water. You know, he's someone that he's always wanted to venture to the outside world. He's always wanted to go elsewhere. He's a little bit tired of his life as a sea monster. So one day when he is in the sea, he gets the opportunity by this character Alberto to actually get to go onto land and basically explore the town of Porto Rosso. And in doing this, he ends up experiencing this summer. But when he eventually does go onto land, he realizes that this is going to turn him into a human. He's now in human form and basically discovers the world of Porto Rosso around him, which will essentially change his life forever, but also has to do what he can to try to hide his disguise from the rest of the crowd who wants to hunt sea monsters and, you know, sees them as predators. And basically now he has to do what he can to try to protect himself, but also start to find his voice a bit more. So Luca, overall, I was very excited for this movie. You know, anytime there's a Pixar film that comes out, I'm very much down for it, but especially these original ones. Those are the ones that I really get excited for, because I really love when Pixar tries to do something different, when Pixar tries to lean into something a little bit more abstract, something a little bit more, something a little bit different than what they've done before. And Luca really seemed like it was going to be that film for them. You know, this is a film that seemed like it had a very different style, it had a very different feel, and especially the premise itself was one I did get very intrigued by. I thought it was a very creative idea. And then when the announcement came that this film was no longer going to be in theaters and only on Disney Plus, I was pretty disappointed, because I really do feel like this is a film that is absolutely the kind of movie that we need in theaters right now. You know, it's this joyful summer film that was going to entertain many. It was going to, you know, just delight all of these families. And the fact that it wasn't going to be able to be seen in theaters, I just thought was really heartbreaking overall. But I was still very excited to see it. It was one of the most anticipated of the entire summer. I finally did check it out, and I will say this film is much different than I overall did expect it to be, but I still think it is a very charming and very optimistic film. Yeah, it's a little bit more simple than other Pixar films, but I think it has a certain warmth and fun to it that a lot of Pixar films do not have, and I think overall makes it stick out very well. But we are just going to get into right now, starting off with the voice cast. And right off the bat, I think that is absolutely one of the best things about this entire movie. I think if the voice cast was not as good as they really were, I don't think this movie really would be. And look, yes, there are a lot of recognizable actors in this movie, but I really think every single actor here really transformed into these roles, really did a great job of becoming these characters. Specifically, Jacob Tremblay, who of course plays our title character, does a really good job here. I was very impressed by the way he went about playing the character of Luca. You can see that he's someone that he's very naive. He doesn't really understand what he's getting himself into, but Tremblay plays this role very well. He is someone that is constantly just awestruck with what he's really seeing, and he's very overwhelmed in the movie, but he always has a positive outlook on things. He always has this can-do attitude, and it is just so rootable and fun to watch, and I think he did a really good job throughout this movie, especially when we start to get a little bit deeper into Luca's essential purpose. I thought he did a really good job here, and again, it's yet another great performance from Tremblay. He continues to show why he's one of the best young actors working today, and this is yet another fantastic effort from him. I really like what he ended up doing in this movie, and I think he played the role very well. For me, though, the big standout of this movie is actually Jack Dylan Grazer, who plays the character of Alberto, who is the complete opposite of Luca. He is very free-spirited. He is actually very well-equipped to the human world and things like that, but he also has a very warped view on things, and that's kind of that he has this aggression to him that you really wouldn't expect. expect, and I think he was fantastic in this movie. The character of Alberto, I'll get into a little bit more, but Grazer did a really good job of diving a little bit deeper into this character and really giving us a sense of what this character's, mindset is, why he feels the way he does about certain things, and I was very impressed by his character, his performance in this movie. I thought he definitely did a really strong job here, and the bond between these two is just absolutely infectious. You can't help but just buy into everything that these two are doing. You really latch onto the friendship that these two really do form. They have really good chemistry together, and I think they work very well here. And also Emma Berman, who plays the character of Julia, she's definitely she's the third member of this crew, but I thought she also did a really good job here. She has a lot more to do in this movie than you probably expect, and I definitely really did like her in the film. I thought that she was definitely a lot of fun to watch, and like I said, I really did enjoy their dynamic throughout this entire film. As far as the rest of the cast goes, I think everyone did do a really good job. Saverio Raimondo, who plays our villain here of Urkel, is so fun in this movie. Urkel's a very different villain than we normally see in Pixar films, but it actually works so well because of Raimondo's performance. I mean, this guy is kind of a wimp. He's really just kind of a loser in that way. He's not good at a lot of things, and Raimondo does a really good job of just showing the confidence that this character has, but also his inability to really do anything. I thought that he was a lot of fun with that. He definitely has a lot of fun moments throughout this entire movie. Maya Rudolph is always good and does a really good job as Luca's mother. You can see why she's so protective of him, and I think she definitely does a really good job here. Marco Barricelli, who plays Julia's father, gave a little bit more than I was expecting him to. I thought he actually gave a really warm and touching performance that I thought worked really well for this character, but he also is a lot of fun to watch, and I thought that he definitely gave a very strong performance. So really just this entire cast, I think everyone did a really good job. I thought all of the acting worked very well here, and definitely is one of the high points of this film. Alright, but now let's get into the directing and the writing, because that is another thing that really works for me in this movie. Enrico Casarosa's directing, I think going into this, you need to know one thing, is that this is not a very overly complex film. It really is just trying to be a lot more simplistic. It's trying to be something that is a lot more fun, and I think it really does work as that, because Casarosa does a really great job of just really taking you along for the ride. This very much does feel like a hangout movie of sorts. You're watching these characters, go about this adventure in this way, and I think he does a really good job at directing it, because it really does give you a sense of fun. It gives you a sense of it gives you a sense of something whimsical, something fun, something lighthearted, and I think he does a good job at directing it overall. And when the film does want to become something a little bit more emotional, it doesn't feel forced. He still does a good job at directing that, and I thought that his directing was still very impressive here. Yes, it's different from other Pixar films. It definitely isn't as deep or, strike you as hard as some of the other ones are, but I don't really think that's what this film is really trying to get at. It's really just trying to be something a little bit more fun and innocent, and I think he does a good job with directing that here. The writing also, I think, is really well done in this film. I think, again, going into this movie, you need to recognize that it is definitely a lot more lighthearted in that way. The journey that Luca and Alberto take, especially, is very lighthearted. They don't really have a lot of goals in this movie. They want this Vespa. This is something that they really are sort of just latching onto, and honestly, that was enough for me. Just seeing these characters, go about things is a lot of fun to watch, especially the contrast between Luca and Alberto, because Luca has such a little understanding of this world and is so adverse to society that he doesn't even know how to walk. He doesn't know how anything works, so he's entirely learning it through this character Alberto. But Alberto has such a warped view of things that you can see that even he doesn't really have a full understanding of what's going on, and that makes for a really fun dynamic. Just seeing the back and forth between these two, I think they do a really good job with. But Julia, as well as a character, was someone that I really did find myself latching onto, because you can see why she is so attached to these two characters, and the similarities between her especially, I thought was really well done, and they did a good job of giving these three characters a lot more to do than you would think. Alberto especially was a much different character than I expect him to be. Like I said, he's very free-spirited, but he's also a little rough around the edges. You see as the film goes on, he starts to become a little bit more intense. He starts to become a little bit more aggressive in that way, and the film does eventually dive into why he feels this way, why he sort of does what he does, and it really does work when you realize what his character is really going through, the conflict that he's struggling with. I thought was really well done, and he actually ended up being my favorite character in the entire movie. I really liked what they ended up doing with him. But of course, the other thing to get out of the way is that, yes, I do think this film is very much trying to be an allegory for the LGBTQ community. I do, because the premise of this film very much is, these sea monsters, they live underwater, they serve their purpose, and to everyone else, they're seen as the devil. They're seen as evil. They're seen as someone that, need to be eradicated of immediately. And obviously, replacing that with the idea of the LGBTQ community, I think works really well in this movie. And while, again, it's not overt, it's not done in a way where it's, really kind of like shoving this issue down your throat, I think there's very much a parallel there. It's a very obvious parallel that I do think they could have dived into a bit more, but I think it still really does work for what they're trying to get at with this movie. I think that's something that's going to touch a lot of people, and I think that message does work very well here and give the film an authenticity that I think if it wasn't there, the film really wouldn't have, and I think they do a good job with that. But it also has a lot more in common with, say, Hayao Miyazaki films than I think you'd expect, because again, it's very simplistic. There isn't a ton going on in terms of conflict here. Yes, obviously the two of them are trying to, protect their human form, but the stakes are kind of low, and I honestly didn't really have that much of a problem with that. I've seen some people complain that they could have done a better job with giving there a bit more of a conflict, but I think because I just found myself so enraptured in this world and really liking all these characters, I didn't really care about the fact that there wasn't a ton going on in terms of the story. I think I just kind of let the characters breathe and the story, tell itself. And I think the film, they did a good job with that overall. So I don't really think they needed to do a ton here. And I think the story, for the most part, really did work overall. Even some of the characters like Massimo, for example, was a lot different than I was expecting. He's not just this like hard-ass father that like is always onto these two. He actually has a bit more to him. He actually has a bit more of an arc that he's going through that I found myself really liking overall. In terms of the animation, though, I mean, that is easily one of the best things about this movie. This is some of the most gorgeous and dazzling animation I think Pixar has done ever. Just especially the look of Porto Rosso. I mean, you really do feel like you're there. The way they recreated this entire look of 1950s Italy, they just did such an excellent job with that. And the look of the human characters, I mean, they have really improved when it comes to how human characters look and feel. This is probably the most realistic they've looked yet in a film, and I think they did such a great job, but it also has a very distinctive look to it than the other human characters in Pixar films, and I like that a lot because I think it helps the film stick out a bit more in terms of its animation. And I think regardless of how you feel about this film, this is one of those films where you really can't take your eyes off that animation, and it really does suck that this film was not able to get a theatrical release, because I think that is one of the things that would have just looked absolutely amazing on screen is the animation here. They did such a great job with it. The score here by Dan Romer as well. I mean, this is a guy that really never misses in terms of his music, and that is very much the case here. I really enjoyed his score throughout this entire film. It was very fun and whimsical, and I thought it worked very well here overall. And the editing, yeah, this is definitely one of the shorter Pixar films in a little bit, and at points maybe it is a little bit too short, but I will say, for me, I thought this film was paced pretty well. I definitely did not find myself bored by this movie. By the time it wrapped up, I felt like it was just enough of what we did get. And I think the film overall is pretty well paced. I don't really have too many issues when it comes to the runtime of this film. That being said, this movie isn't perfect. There definitely are a couple things that I think do overall bring it down. The biggest being that the world building here is very weak. Obviously, Porto Rosso, I said, is very well fleshed out. You know, we get a sense of who these characters are. We get a sense of, you know, them trying to go through this conflict, but the Sea World does not really feel like as prominent of a role as it should. We don't really get a lot of time to see what Luca's essential role is. We know some of what he's doing, but we don't really know a ton about that part of his life. We know that obviously he's a sea monster, and we know when he comes up, he's human, but the logistics of that and why that's a thing, that's something that the film doesn't really tell us. And I didn't really have a problem with that. I have more of an issue with the fact that we just didn't really get enough of the SeaWorld. And I would have liked to see more of that. I would have liked to cut back to it every so often. But once Luca goes on this adventure, even his parents and his grandmother turn into humans, and they're trying to find him throughout this entire movie, but all that really amounts to is just them looking for a kid and tossing them in the water and trying to figure out if it's their son, and that's really all they do with them. It's kind of just the same joke over and over again, and that did start to get a bit old for me. I felt like there was more they could have done with his parents in the film, and they just didn't really take that opportunity, so that did kind of bring things down for me. And I also felt Luca as a character was still really good. I found myself still attached to him overall, but I will say, with how much Alberto and Julia had, I do think Luca is probably the least interesting of the three, but there is still always something to latch onto. You do find yourself really liking his character, but it's nothing more than really just a typical sort of coming-of-age journey for him. With the way his story plays out, it is quite predictable where he is ultimately going to go. But again, I think it's done in a way that is so charming and fun that it didn't really bother me all that much. And I will also say, as much as I did enjoy the villain of Urkel, I liked the fact that he was kind of a wimp. He was kind of this guy that nobody really, that everyone is fearful of, but yet he is someone that is really kind of bad at everything. I felt that he was a little bit underused. I think they could have used him a bit more in this movie. I think he is a little bit one note at times, and I would have liked a little bit more from him as a character. But really, other than that, there isn't really a lot more that I could have asked out of Luca. I think this is a film that is a lot of fun. I think it captures the summer feel very well. It's got three really great performances from Jacob Tremblay, Jack Dylan Grazer, and Emma Berman. All of them do a really good job at anchoring this movie and just making it very fun and likable. It's got a message that I think is going to touch many, but it's not done in a way that is as emotional as you would expect it to be. It's trying to be a lot more lighthearted. It's trying to be a lot more simplistic, and I think it really does work as that. I don't need every Pixar film to be Inside Out. I don't need every Pixar film to be Soul. I appreciate it when it is. I like the fact when Pixar tries to get a bit deeper. I like the fact when Pixar does try to go the extra mile and get a bit more existential with what it's really trying to get at, you know, more philosophical, kind of, you know, touch at more adult themes. But I also appreciate when Pixar is a little bit more simplistic and when they are just trying to be a fun film, when they are just trying to delight you, when they are just trying to make you feel good. And I think that's something that Pixar does better than a lot of other animated studios. The desired emotion, you know, is something that I think they always do a good job with, and that very much is still the case with Luca. This film entertained me a lot. I had a big smile on my face. I found myself really just enjoying what these characters were going through. It didn't even matter, you know, how complex they were. It didn't even matter, you know, what specifically was troubling them. I just really was enjoying everything this film was giving, and so I really couldn't have asked for anything more. There are some aspects of the plot that I think could have been touched upon a little bit more, but overall, I still had a really good time with Luca, and I am going to give it a B. But over, guys, my review of Luca. Lemons, guys, saw this movie. All left your thoughts, and we'll see you guys in my next video, and I will see you guys for that. Okay, bye.